Hello everyone, and welcome back to my ongoing series on Solidworks tutorials. I'm revisiting this piece right here, which is from my last video on reference geometry, for a very specific reason, because I want to talk about what all of these icons do at the top of your screen. They're all very handy, and like anything else, you can mouse over them and get an idea of what they do because it'll give you this little display box. So for the first one, I'm going to zoom way out, and you can see what it does is zoom to fit, which if I click that, it will bring it up to the size of the sheet with a little bit of margins on the side. You can also notice that when I moused over it, there's that F in parentheses, which is a hotkey. So I can actually hit my F on my keyboard and it will do the exact same thing. The next one is zoom to area. Let me zoom out again and I'll show you what that does. When I click that, it will ask you to draw a bounding box around it. So that's pretty easy. Maybe you want to zoom in on a specific feature, maybe that hole right there. So that's a very handy thing to do, especially if you need to zoom quickly or you want to go to a specific spot, which you don't always have a lot of control when using the scroll wheel. The next one over is this little spyglass looking fella. Again, it shows you a hotkey, Control-Shift-Z, and it displays the previous view. So let's say you wanted to zoom around and, with your scroll wheel, you're kind of messing everything up and you have no idea how to get back. You can just hit that button and it'll bring you right back to the view you were before you messed everything up. And like I said, you could hit Control-Shift-Z and it will do the exact same thing. The next one up is section view, which lets you basically cut away a portion of your model, and you can click that and choose a face. In this case, it's going off of the front plane and it's a cutaway of the model at that point, but it can actually be a particular face. So here's another model of a grinding vise that you'll see in a future video, and if I click section view on this, of course it will show me a section view based on any of the planes, and I can choose any of them with these buttons right here. You can, well, I don't have an axis of revolution to see, or let's say I wanted to see a cutout at that face right there. Then you can just choose any face on the material and it will show you exactly what you're looking for. This is exactly the same way that a section view works in a drawing as well. And you'll see that in a future video, possibly with this piece. We'll see. The next one I've shown in previous videos, but I'll go ahead and show it again in case you haven't watched those. And that is your view orientation. I can click this drop down right here and it will bring up a menu right here of various views for the part, and if I mouse over it long enough it will give me a preview of what I'll see if I click that button. Likewise, it also gives you this cube down here, and you can also see previews up in the top right corner of how that will look. You can still use your scroll wheel by clicking the scroll wheel and moving around just like you can on any other face. I can choose any of these faces and see the view from that point. Or you can notice these faces are floating, and that way you can click on them without having to actually move your scroll wheel around. You'll see that they kind of go back into the cube as I scroll around and as you have access. So if I really wanted to see over here, I could click that without having to move my scroll wheel very much. I'm going to go back to my previous view and let's look at the next one. I've shown this as well. That's your display style. If I click that down, it defaults to this top one, which is shaded with edges. I could just do shaded and it takes away the edges. I find that difficult to see features, so I generally don't use that one. You could just go wireframe with the hidden lines removed, and that's nice and clean looking. You can choose to see the hidden lines, which it's not showing them very clearly right now, and I think that's because of one of the other buttons I have chosen. And then likewise, you can see everything is just a wireframe model where you can see everything. This, especially when you're looking through multiple features, gets pretty muddy looking. So I generally don't use this one either, but it is a good way to see certain features as if you can just see through the part. I'm going to go back to shaded with edges like I normally use. And the next one over, I'm going to go back to my first model because I want to show you something very specific. So this one has a reference plane from my previous drawing, and it's the plane that I used to draw this hole from. Well, the problem is now you've got this plane just showing up in the middle of your model. Well, if you click this next icon and you click the drop down next to it, you get a very large drop down that lets you choose what geometry is shown on your part. And you can hide that plane by just clicking that one. You can also hide any of these other features, most of which are not actually shown in this drawing, so it's not that great of a demonstration of what this can do. But I've found this to be very handy in assemblies, where, especially in step files where a customer has sent me a part and I look at it in the assembly and you can see every plane of every part or the origins of the different parts. So you can use this to hide all of those things and make it a lot easier to see that particular feature. Speaking of assemblies, first of all, I'm going to hide that plane back there, and then I'm going to show you the next button over, which is Edit Appearance. In an assembly, it's not always easy to see what part's what. So this is my sample assembly from way back when. I don't even remember which video it was. If I click Edit Appearance on this one, it opens up this dialog box right here, and you've got a lot of options like every dialog box in Solidworks. The first ones I want to look at are this one up here, the Selected Geometry. It lets me choose a part of my assembly. So I'm going to choose that little barbed fitting on the end. You can choose whether to apply this at the component level, which is just in the assembly, so it would only change this particular part while it's in the assembly, or you can apply it at the part document level, which would actually go back to the part file and change it there as well. To make this easier to see that these are separate parts, you can go ahead and change things to different colors. So we could make that red, and I'm going to click the OK button for that. And now if I go back to Edit Appearance, and maybe this time I will change this section right here, and we'll make that green, and click the check mark. Now I can see that these are two separate parts, distinct parts, and I can see where they're actually fitting together if you look through the hole there. It's not super critical that you do this. I mean, you can certainly do assemblies without doing this, but in large assemblies with a lot of parts, it does make it easier to see things. I'm going to go ahead and undo both of those. The next button is Apply Scene, and this is pretty much strictly cosmetic for the model. There are aspects of it that make it a little bit easier to look at the model, and I'll show you that in a second. If you click the drop down, you see all of your options and it gives you a preview. On these two down here, I think you actually need to import an image for the background. I've never really played with it. But mainly these are changing the lighting. So right now I've got it at 3-point faded, and that gives it this sort of triangular shadow in the background here and changes the light source a little bit. If I click to plain white, it's a little bit less washed out in spots, so it's a bit easier to see. You can see basically you have a light source shining back here and then a shadow in the front. It's nice and clean looking, not too bad to look at. If I go to backdrop gray with overhead light, it's a lot more washed out in the back. Also, you don't have to click the drop down each time. If you instead just click the button, it moves to the next one. So this is the soft spotlight, and I really like this one. It's very clean looking, it's easy to look at the model and see all the details, and you don't get the washed out effect. Plus there's not the shadow in the background that serves no real purpose. If I click it again, it brings it to rooftop, which I guess it's dramatic. I wouldn't say anything else about this. It just gives you that unnecessary shadow in the background. And then, like I said, on the last two, you actually have to import an image, I think. I haven't played with either of these, but right now I don't have an image in the background, so it's just basically the same as plain white, I believe. No, not quite the same, but I like the soft spotlight. For our last button, this is view settings, and again, this is largely cosmetic. You can turn shadows on. So let's imagine this part was sitting on a table. That's where your shadows would be, right there. You can actually turn any or all of these on at the same time. Not entirely sure what ambient occlusion does. It doesn't seem to have an effect on this model. I'll just go ahead and turn that off again. Perspective, if you turn that on, let me click that, and you can now see there's a point defined way off here in the distance, and if you're looking down your part, it's basically trying to disappear into that point, like you were looking at a down a long roadway. By the way, those points, you can turn those off with the visibility settings over here. So if I click that and choose to turn off the origins, and then they disappear, and then you're no longer looking for them. They're not cluttering up your model anymore. The last one is cartoon, which basically, I mean, you can see the lines come back when you pan around, but otherwise they disappear, and it's pretty much just like turning off the edges. I don't particularly like that look though, so I'm going to turn that off. I'll really just turn all of these off. They're not particularly handy when you're actually doing your model. I don't need realism at this stage. I need to be able to see what I'm doing. That just about does it for this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. And if you have any questions about this or any other SolidWorks or machining topic, let me know down in the comments. Also, I have a Patreon page, so if you want to feel like supporting it and helping make these videos, check out the link down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.